You're listening to the Health and Happiness Podcast with Travis Kemper and
Lauren Maxwell. Each episode, we share easy-to-implement strategies to improve your health, happiness, and overall quality of life. Reading is to the mind what exercise is to the body. Sir Richard Steele. How's it going, Travis?
good. I get to stop shadowing and actually see patients tomorrow. So that is exciting.
That's awesome. Did you just shadow your first week? That was it?
First week and a half.
Oh, that's right. Because last week was like a half a week. I forgot.
Yes. By the way, happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
So I'm very excited to actually get my patients tomorrow because, oh my God, shadowing is boring.
Yeah.
The gym is coming along. We have half the drywall up in the gym section of the basement. So we're working on that after we finish today.
Yay.
Yeah.
That's
very excited. How's it going?
It's going pretty good. Thanksgiving was on Thursday, so we went down to Phoenix to see my dad. And then we actually did get to see one of Nolan's best friends as well. It's been, I don't even know how long since we've seen him. So it was really exciting to get to go see him. Keely is very happy to be back home now. She hates driving. So driving down to Phoenix and then between houses and then back up to Flagstaff was kind of a lot for her. But she's in her element again in the cold weather because I feel like she just comes alive when it's freezing outside. So
too.
I'm like, It's too cold for you to want to stay outside. I'm too cold, but
they get too hot.
Yeah.
When it's hot. Yeah. Yep. Duke's the same way. When he didn't do it on Thursday, we took him for a hike in the snow. And he didn't do it there. He was excited, but usually when we get out of the car in the snow, the last 4 times I've taken him up the mountain, he just starts sprinting in big circles. He gets the zoomies as soon as he sees the snow. And I take him up the mountain twice a week, and he doesn't usually do that unless there's snow. So yeah, we'll see if it continues. But
something special about the snow and the cold weather.
He gets so excited.
Keely hasn't seen snow yet this year. I mean, obviously last year, she loves the snow. So I'm excited for it to like snow enough for her to.
You guys haven't gotten any?
We only had one day of snow in October. And then, the mountain has had snow. It just snowed on the mountain last Tuesday. But not, barely enough for for Snowbowl to even open. They had delayed their opening because we haven't had snow.
Yeah, ours delayed too. Even the big resorts delayed out here.
Really?
Yeah, some of them didn't open on Thanksgiving. Like the place we went to last year is called Beaver Creek. Mm-hmm. It's a very, very big place, and it didn't open. Dang. So yeah.
Snowbowl opened on Wednesday after the snow, but it only had the expert lines open, which was a bummer because our previous plans for Thanksgiving was to go snowboarding. So we had to change our plans because I am not an expert at all at snowboarding.
Maybe you can go on Christmas. That's what we did last Christmas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hopefully. So we're anxiously awaiting.
Yeah, I don't get too excited until February.
Oh, that's a long time to wait.
The snow's much better in I don't know what you call that, late winter, early spring, whatever. Yeah, the snow's much, much better by then.
I think that's the only time I've ever been snowboarding is late January or February.
Yeah, it hurts a lot less to fall then.
Yeah, which is probably why I've enjoyed it more because I fall a lot. Anyway, what are we going to talk about today, Travis?
The benefits of reading.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, this should be fun.
I'm excited about this.
Yeah, I think we've talked about reading in the past. It's part of my morning routine.
That's when we talked about it. I was like, we definitely have talked about it, but I can't remember when.
But we decided we're going to do a whole episode on the benefits of reading. And they're kind of shocking. And it's also kind of shocking that there's not a ton of research on it. Mm-hmm. But the research that's available is pretty good. So we'll get into that.
Yeah, I actually learned a lot from the research that we did. So anyway, I guess to start you off, we'll just chat about the benefits of reading. Like let's just go for it. Um, so reading can help you fall asleep. I feel
It's
like
because it's
that's a
boring.
depending on what
Sorry.
book you read. But yeah, I mean, that's what people tell you is you have trouble sleeping, you should read. That does not work for me because the books that I read are very interesting. I can literally stay up all night and read a book, but I digress. It could also help lower your stress through laughter or tears. I'm assuming happy tears or sad. I guess if you're releasing that emotion, you're reducing stress.
I was gonna say crying's good for you.
It is good for you. I cry all the time. It can provide an escape from reality, which is my favorite part of reading. And my second favorite part of reading, it can offer exposure to perspectives different than your own. I love that part. So those were the two that I was familiar with, I guess. But guess what? It can also raise your intelligence. So researchers at the University of Edinburgh and King's College London tested 1,890 pairs of twins 5 times from the ages 7 to 16 for reading ability and IQ. They found that the kids with better reading ability compared with their twin also showed higher verbal and nonverbal cognitive ability. The authors speculated that while reading may help people remember facts, it may also give people practice in abstract thinking through the process of imagining a book's plot and putting oneself in the shoes of characters.
Oh, so it actually helped their IQ
I know, isn't that
in
fascinating?
comparison to the twins. Yeah, I didn't know that we found anything that can help IQ.
Twin
thought that was-
studies.
Yeah.
So
right.
cool. Yeah, so I didn't know that. So raises your intelligence. It can also make you happier. A study at University of Liverpool surveyed 4,164 adults and found that readers reported being less stressed and less depressed, and having higher levels of self-esteem and a greater ability to cope with challenges. Compared with non-readers, they also scored higher in terms of feeling close to friends and their community and had stronger awareness of social issues and cultural diversity. Pretty
That's
cool.
good. Yeah.
And the last one that I had no idea of, well, no, I guess I kind of had an idea of this, but it protects your memory. I think we have talked about this a little bit.
And this makes sense.
It makes sense.
Because of the opening quote.
Right.
Sorry.
It's exercise for your mind.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah, this makes sense because of the opening quote. It really is exercise for your mind.
Right. So a study published in the American Academy of Neurology tested the memory and thinking ability of 294 people every year for about 6 years before their deaths, which on average occurred at age 89. After their death, their brains were autopsied for evidence of dementia, such as lesions, plaques, and tangles. Those who reported doing mentally stimulating activities early and late in life had a slower rate of memory decline compared with those who had not. The rate of decline was reduced by 32% in people who were mentally active in their later years compared with people whose mental activity was only average. And the people who reported infrequent mental activity declined 48% faster than those who worked their brains in average amount.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting thing to report. Yeah, I don't use my brain very much. It's an interesting thing to admit. I would think there's like a level of lying, even if you look at it and you're like, yeah, I really don't use my brain very much. Let's put not so much, on the sliding scales.
Yeah, really. I guess I didn't even think about that, of like reporting that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like people would be more inclined to say that they use their brains an average amount.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's like driving, where if you survey drivers, something like 80% say they're above average drivers. It's like, well, we know that's not true.
Right.
Anyway, so my favorite thing, mortality.
It wouldn't be an episode of the Health and Happiness podcast if we didn't have Travis talking about mortality.
It's the ultimate outcome measure. So there's a study that tried to determine whether reading books had actual health benefits, and they specifically looked at longevity. A study consisted of 3,635 participants who provided information about their reading patterns at baseline. The results showed that book reading contributed to a survival advantage that was significantly greater than that observed for reading newspapers or magazines. My first thought on this is magazines are garbage in general, and newspapers are doom and gloom. So they're going to lead to depression and anxiety. It's like watching the news. We had that episode.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my first thought. So you're actually you're probably better off not reading than reading newspapers.
Compared to those things, for sure.
Yeah. Book readers experienced a 20% reduction in risk of mortality over the 12 years of follow-up compared to non-book readers.
Holy cow.
So yeah, it's just one study. It did have 3,600 people, so that's a decent sized study.
Mm-hmm.
But it does lend some evidence to suggest that reading can possibly help you live a longer life. And I'm guessing with all the other benefits that if you did a quality of life study, it would also be a higher quality of life, which means you're living a healthy life longer.
Mm-hmm. Which is what it's all about.
Yeah.
We also found a study about reading books and its relation to happiness. So a study across 13 countries shows that reading improves our relationships, helps us connect with others, and more. This was a lot of statistics that came out of the study, which is pretty cool. I'll just list some of them here. 71% of weekly readers reported feeling happier compared to 55% of other readers, so not weekly readers. More than 80% credit reading for improving their relationship, and 81% look forward to discussing at least one aspect of the book with others. More than 65% of people around the world agree that reading is a major turn on. 41% of global couples say discussing books was one of the things that made them fall in love with their significant other.
Wow.
I know. All of this kind of surprised me.
Yeah, I wouldn't have guessed that either. Also, some studies that looked at reading and income. One study in particular looked at 5,280 European men and women that were born between 1920 and 1956. If that seems like a long time ago, it's because it was, but they did a long-term follow-up so that they could find out who made more money. And it indicated that those who read at least 10 non-school books while they were kids ended up with 21% more income than those who did not read outside of school. The study also concluded that after 10 books, there was no significant correlation between higher numbers of freely read books and higher income. So if you have kids, you may want to encourage them to read outside of school. And a goal would be 10 books a year. So maybe you make the goal 1 book a month.
Yeah, that's actually a really good goal. And that's crazy. 21% more income for those who read 10 books that they were not forced to read in school.
I have a Facebook friend from a group that I'm in, and anybody can steal this idea. I'm sure he won't be upset. And I don't even know what his name is at this point. I just saw a post from him once that said, my son or my daughter thinks they're getting over on me every time they finish a chapter book, because I told them over the summer when they're not in school, I will give them $1 for every chapter book they read. And then it says, this is the best investment I've ever made in my life, because she's reading so much. He or she, I don't remember.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Anyway, Lauren, so does it matter if you read fiction or nonfiction?
So before we actually researched this, my gut would have told me that it probably matters and you should probably read nonfiction, which means I'm probably not doing myself any good because I pretty much exclusively read fiction.
I try and force myself to read fiction because it's hard for me.
It's really hard for me to read nonfiction.
I just like to learn shit. Excuse me.
Well, that's what I thought was better for you, but it turns out research suggests that reading fiction may provide, I don't know if this article said far more important benefits. I don't know if I would say far more important, but also definitely important in addition to nonfiction. So for example, reading fiction predicts increased social acuity and a sharper ability to comprehend other people's motivations. Reading nonfiction will certainly be valuable for collecting knowledge, but it doesn't really necessarily do a lot to develop emotional intelligence, which is a harder goal to achieve, I guess. Reading literary fiction can help people develop empathy, theory of mind, and critical thinking. One of the things that this article talked about that fiction does so well is it has characters, plots, and settings in foreign locations that help anchor difficult discussions. Again, it's really just getting different perspectives on things. It allows people or readers to work through sensitive and nuanced issues in an open and honest manner. Fiction can provide an opportunity to complicate standard good versus evil. So it basically talks about things in like not a black and white. Fiction goes through a lot of gray. Your like favorite, I mean, and you see this in movies too. It's not, I mean, not just reading, but like your favorite character. So for example, the first thing that popped into my brain when I was reading this article and it was talking about this is the character Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean, because he is not necessarily a good or evil character. He kind of is just like out for his own self. And you kind of like, as a participant in this story, try to figure out whether you like him or you're rooting for him or you're rooting against him, because he's not like the binary black and white. So you're kind of like going on an adventure with this like perspective shifting of like, what does it mean to be good and evil, or can a person be both? So research suggests that reading literary fiction is an effective way to enhance the brain's ability to keep an open mind while processing information, which is a necessary skill for effective decision making.
All right. Well, that's good to know. I try and read fiction. It's just really hard for me. I can listen to it though, which we'll talk about next.
Right.
But also, just in case there's any nonfiction readers out there that are like, oh no, they just told me what I'm doing is worthless.
Oh no.
Not necessarily.
No.
So we didn't summarize all the studies in reading, but there was one in particular that I read yesterday that said people that read nonfiction business books make more money. So depends what your goal is.
I mean, and it makes more, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because like if you're reading for knowledge, you're gaining knowledge. So I mean, it's just, right. I thought there was zero worth to reading fiction. Turns out there is worth. It's just different than the nonfiction where like you're gaining skills versus, well, you're gaining skills in both, but you're gaining like knowledge skills versus like emotional intelligence skills, I guess.
Well, I learn something every time I read my favorite nonfiction or fiction. I hate those words, Lauren.
It doesn't so make sense. Up. I know.
Why is the true thing? The thing based on real life,
right?
Called non.
I know. I remember learning that when I was in, I don't know what age I learned that as, but as a young kid, I learned the difference between fiction and nonfiction, and I was like, why? Yeah. Why?
Well, I'm 34 and I struggle with it still because it's so absurd. Anyway, my favorite fiction writer, I learn from him every time that I read his books. There's one fiction writer that I can consistently leave.
And who's that?
His name's Douglas E. Richards.
Oh, I don't even know that author.
It's like near future sci-fi or something like that, I think is what he calls it. Yeah. Anyway.
Cool.
So I have noticed in myself that my retention is much better when I listen to books. So I listen to a lot of Audible. I read every morning, but I find that I don't retain much. So like I'll be reading, and I also get this when I'm watching something, but I'll be reading and I'm like, what happened that led to this point? Because I stopped reading it, yesterday, and I don't remember anything that could have possibly led to right now. Yeah. So anyway, study that had 91 participants who were randomly assigned to one of 3 groups that received the same instructional material, but each in a different input modality: digital audiobook, e-text, or both. After completing the material, participants took the same comprehension test in written form to establish both immediate comprehension and again after 2 weeks to determine the retention.
That's a long gap.
Yeah, no statistically significant differences were found for any of the different input modalities on comprehension at immediately after or after 2 weeks. Additional analysis showed that both men and women in each condition recalled an equal amount of information, regardless of whether they listened to an audiobook, read from an electronic tablet, or both listened and read simultaneously. So they were equal in your ability to retain the information. That's the important part.
Right.
Which is
That's
good
awesome.
for me.
Which is good for me. Yeah, I legitimately, this was a question that I had, I think when we were talking about reading in our morning routine episode, I was wondering if reading versus listening to a book had the same effects, or at least, you were able to do or retain it the same, which this kind of answers my question.
I actually looked this up as soon as I found audiobooks. Because I was like, I remember this so much better than when I read.
Oh, so interesting.
So I looked it up to see if it's as valuable normally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had known this one just from personal curiosity.
Yeah, that's cool. There was another study that we found that shows that women learn better from auditory learning in general.
I think I might be a woman.
And I might not be.
You might be a man.
I might, or at least not be a woman. I don't know. Based on this, it said, or one study, this study took a look at gender and age group differences in episodic memory with respect to the type of task in a sample of 366 women and 330 men aged between 16 and 69 years of age. Results indicated that women outperformed men on auditory memory tasks, whereas male adolescents and older male adults showed higher level performances on visual episodic and visual working memory measures.
This is definitely not true in my house, and it gets commented on regularly. Well, it's like I'll listen to a podcast or to a book, and I'll come home and I'll tell Julia about it, and she'll be like, I do not remember that stuff the way that you do. But then we'll be watching, like, every now and then we'll get into a series of TV episodes, like an actual series, and we'll watch it and we'll go back, the next day or 2 days later, whatever, and we'll watch the next episode. It's like, I don't remember anything from the last episode. Nothing.
See, that's so funny because that's how I am too. Like, no, I'm like Julia. I don't, but so to argue that point, when I'm listening to audiobooks or listening to podcasts, I'm usually like multitasking in the sense of that I'm like driving on a road that takes a lot of focus. the road that I drive to get out to work takes a lot of focus because it's a 1-lane road and you have to pass in the opposing traffic lane, which is very stressful for me. I am not the kind of driver that enjoys doing that. So I think that probably plays into my not being able to remember what I listen to, because there's gaps of time where I am not listening to it. It's on, but I'm not listening or comprehending it. Whereas like if I'm actually like sitting down and watching a show, it usually has most of my attention.
That's interesting. We were listening while we were working on the basement yesterday. We were listening to a podcast, and at one point they said something interesting, and I looked over at Julia. I was like, "Did you hear that?" She's like, "No, I legitimately don't hear anything when I'm working on the basement." She's like, "I'm working." I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, yeah, our brains just work a little differently."
It's definitely harder for me to multitask in that sense, like listening and performing something that takes attention. I don't know.
Right. What are you listening? What are you reading now?
The last book that I read was actually Hocus Pocus, because I was reading it in October, and
Nice.
there's a sequel to Hocus Pocus that's supposed to be coming out. So that's like my favorite Halloween movie, which is why I was reading the book. I didn't either. So I just made a friend who is a big reader. She's an occupational therapist who lives in my apartment complex. And she and I have been trading books because I finally found like a reader friend. So anyway, she gave me that book to read over October, because we had watched Hocus Pocus together, because we were both bonding over the fact that it was our favorite Halloween movie. And then she was like, by the way, there's a sequel. And I was like, by the way, it's a book. And she was like, oh yeah, here it is. And then, so yeah, that was the last book I read. But now I have to get another book because I just finished that one. Any suggestions? What are you reading right now?
I am listening to a book called Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. And I am reading a book. Well, I'm reading two. There's one I read every night. I can't remember the guy's name, but it's 366 meditations on life or something. So it's a daily meditation. So it's
cool.
Really, yeah, it's a really short, it's a quote from an old like Marcus Aurelius type Stoic author. And then he kind of puts his 2 cents into it. So that's like 5 minutes of reading, if that. And then I'm reading an Irish Johansson book. It's like a suspense book. Suspense
I like
thriller.
those kind.
Yeah, I'm trying.
The fiction.
I'm trying.
Yeah.
I'm seriously trying, but it's not like grabbing me at all.
Yeah. Well, you also have to find specific books that do grab you. I'm not interested in every fiction book ever just because it's fiction. You have to find ones that like hook you.
I have to finish things when I start them.
I do most of the time, but books is not like, if I am not hooked on a book by like chapter 3, I'm usually not going to read the full thing and I'll just go to a different book. If it's fiction, like
I should do that.
Nonfiction.
I should get a different book.
Nonfiction, I would finish it if I started it because it's knowledge, and if I read it, it was for the purpose of gaining knowledge, right? But fiction is mostly for the purpose of entertainment. I'm not gonna force myself to be entertained.
That's a good point. I should read a different book.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, this was fun.
Yeah, this was fun.
This is fun. Great job today, Lauren.
You too, Travis. This was a great episode.
Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next week for whatever we're about to decide we're going to talk about.
Who knows? Bye.
Bye. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to listen to this episode of the Health and Happiness Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode and are getting benefits from our content.
If your life is improving in part due to the information in this podcast, we would greatly appreciate you sharing the episode with your family and friends on social media and leaving us a review so we can continue to reach more people and improve the health and happiness of the community at large.
Thanks again, and we will see you next week for another episode of the Health and Happiness Podcast.